What's the economic impact of the protests in Hong Kong? We're going to talk about that. And did you know the U.S. military is helping to train the Nigerians to fight Boko Haram? All that and more coming up on today's Hot Zone.
This is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hey everybody, Chuck Holton here. Thanks for being a part of the Hot Zone. And as you can see, I'm up here in my office, again on the roof of my house. We've got this nice little sitting area up here. And I swear, if it's not raining, I would rather just be here than just about any place in the world. I mean, look at this view. It's unbelievable. And if you're not seeing the view because you're listening to the podcast, well, I'm sorry. But you can go find it on Ops Lens TV, or you can watch it on YouTube. Just do a Google search, or do a search there on YouTube for Hot Zone Podcast with Chuck Holton, and you'll find me. You can tell I'm enjoying being home and just working on stuff around the house here. Not really shaving, just kind of getting kind of crusty, but that's the way it goes. I'm still kind of recuperating from my recent trip, so that I'm enjoying that for sure. I want to talk a little bit about Hong Kong today. I also thought I would talk about Nigeria some more because I found some very interesting things about the U.S. military and what we're doing to help the Nigerians fight ISIS and Boko Haram. But first, before we get to that, I just wanted to show you the video of this burning cruise ship in Russia. This decommissioned cruise ship caught fire, and nobody got hurt, nobody got killed or anything like that. This ship was supposed to be scrapped anyway, but somehow it caught fire. They're not sure why. And the only reason I'm telling you about it is because the footage is pretty awesome. So again, you should be watching the podcast to see that. But moving on to Hong Kong, you've seen all these protests have been going on for 9 or 10 weeks now, where Hong Kongers are protesting the mainland Chinese government's some policies with extradition and things like that. And China is getting pretty fed up with it. They have started moving troops up into the region. They're getting ready to perhaps invade Hong Kong. That could be really bad. We saw some interesting footage of that come out today. And they interviewed an economic expert about what the economic consequences are of all these protests. And I just wanted to share that with you, so check that out.
So we tend to focus, I hear this all the time, on tourism and retail sales, which obviously is an immediate impact. But I think we can't forget the idea, the fact that investors wait when they see risk. And that is a massive impact that we can't measure yet because it has just happened. So the longer it takes, the more it will affect the Hong Kong real economy. And as I said, to the extent that we could look at severe implications because of a structural change. Is Hong Kong a reliable global financial center? Once we start asking these questions, the impact can be massive. So we are really at the first stage where we talk about retail sales, mainland tourists coming into Hong Kong, but this is just the beginning of something more relevant, in my opinion, in terms of a transmission mechanism of this crisis into Hong Kong's economic data. For me, the key question is how protracted it will be, and if it becomes kind of an integral part of life in Hong Kong in a way or another. I'm not talking about extreme scenarios. We know for a fact that will severely affect investment in Hong Kong and also Hong Kong's role as financial center, because at the end of the day, whoever has its savings in Hong Kong as a non-resident will probably over time, if they see that this is protracted, take that money and leave. So that scenario of an immediate stress on the Hong Kong dollar may not happen immediately, but it may happen as we see that the economy is really weak, that the situation, kind of gets it becomes more structural than a one shock, summer shock, let's call it that way. So in that regard, I think we need to wait for autumn and see how this is reflected in the data.
So Hong Kongers have kind of taken a break after shutting down the airport for a couple of days. That caused a lot of consternation. And, I really am against any kind of protest like that. If you got a problem with the government of China, take it up with the government of China. Don't make it my problem by shutting down the airport or shutting down the main road into the town or, freeways or stuff like that. You're certainly not going to get any sympathy from anybody if you're shutting down if you're making everybody's lives more difficult. I don't have anything to do with what China is doing to Hong Kong. So if I want to fly into Hong Kong, I should be able to fly in there. If you're shutting down the airport and shutting down commerce, well, you're doing it wrong, in my opinion, and you're just turning the whole country against you. It's the same kind of thing with all these taxi drivers who are protesting Uber. You see that all around the world. Pretty much everywhere I go, there have been big protests against Uber because they're actually crushing taxi drivers, and they're doing it because Uber is better. I'm sorry, but if you're a taxi driver, you need to be getting out of that business and getting into driving an Uber, because Uber is a much better, it's a category killer. That app has changed the world. I can more safely take a taxi anywhere that Uber operates these days, because I can order the thing on my phone. I can know who the guy is coming to pick me up. He doesn't know he was going to pick me up until I call for him, and so he can't plan to kidnap me or anything like that. And I can tell him where I want to go without having to speak the local language, and I can have a record of it once I finish my ride. And if for some reason I leave something in his car or whatever, I can find the guy again. And so it's just a much, much better option than the old-fashioned taxis. So I'm sorry, taxi drivers, if you want to shut down the city or shut down the freeway or something in a protest, you're not getting any sympathy from me. And I make sure to tell those guys that whenever they ask me if I want to ride. You should too. Okay, I'm going to quit ranting about that. Now let's move on to Nigeria. As you know from yesterday's podcast, I've been talking about how Christians are being affected by ISIS and Boko Haram in Nigeria. And we've got a lot more to say about that. We're still working on a CBN piece about that. But also, I wanted to show you some of what the U.S. military has been doing since about February of 2018 to help train the Nigerian forces to more effectively combat ISIS and Boko Haram inside their country. They've also been working in Cameroon. So check this out.
So we're out here today, actually, right here at the infantry school for the Nigerian Army. It's an opportunity for us to contribute to our capacity building of our partner nation, build the capacity of one of the best fighting forces in the continent of Africa.
So basically we're out here training the Nigerian infantry one company at a time. We're focusing on small unit tactics. We're taking these platoons and they're going out on long range patrols. They're doing raids, ambushes, movement of contact. Every basic soldier task and drill that infantry guys know and love.
They have a great deal of hospitality. They welcome us here with open arms. They're really excited to work with the American Army side to side.
The Nigerians have been absolutely motivated and very receptive to anything we teach them. They ask a lot of really good questions, and they're not the type of soldiers who would just accept the answer, nod their head up and down, and drive on with the mission without knowing why.
They obviously know our history as a force, so they take every lecture we give them very serious, and they're willing to learn. You can tell by their effort. They're giving maximum participation, and their motivation is always high.
So we really had to observe them, assess them, and take what they did or didn't do, and then fill in the gaps as we saw necessary. They have a wide variety of training backgrounds. Some guys are new, some guys have been up to the fighting with Boko Haram. Some guys have been in the Army but haven't seen combat yet. And so the challenge for my NCOs has been to take all of that experience and make it into one cohesive platoon as the training continues. We know that the threat that they face is very real. Boko Haram, ISIS up in the Northeast is something that's not going away. And so for my guys to be able to come here and train, knowing these guys will very shortly deploy, it's like I said, it's humbling to know we're that close and that hopefully we're teaching them techniques that'll save lives on the battlefield.
Well, I mean, we have bed space, plenty of places to sleep. The food's great. We hired a spouse of one of the Nigerian Army soldiers. She cooks for us, provides water. We come over here to this big pump and get our own water to flush our toilets. Since water happens intermittently, it's not always a fixed, system or anything like that. And we got water, we got soda, we got crackers, cookies, hot meals, beds, mosquito nets. What more can you ask for?
Let's bed. Prepare your weapons, everything, get ready for the mission because very soon it's going to get cracking. Is that clear?
Yes, sir!
Is that clear?
Yes, sir!
Get on!
Woo! Up, up!
Get on!
Woo! Up, up! Woo! Up, up!
All right, I see some guys walking so fast they can't hold their weapon at the low ready, so they have to hold it like this to try to keep up, okay? When you walk too fast, you miss the threat.
There's some cover over here versus concealment. They shouldn't get behind the cover. And the assault, it wasn't strong enough, so they, you know what I'm saying? It was a little disorganized, okay? So they're gonna do it again.
Make sure every section is doing what they're doing. Because if you're calm, the platoon sergeant is calm, and all your section leaders are calm.
You don't like where they're at? I don't want you over there. I want you over there. Be specific.
You have a bridge team. You have a primary and an alternate, right? Because no matter what happens, we have to be able to continue the mission, right?
Yes. A lot of the soldiers, they have to, at the minimum, spend 4 years as a private before they get their promotion to Lance Corporal. And a lot of them, right after basic training, get sent over to the Northeast.
I was getting a feedback from the leadership and the soldiers, making sure they understand the importance of knowing the mission. Anything could happen, leadership could be killed or wounded, and somebody needs to step up to the plate, take charge, and accomplish the mission.
The section leaders, make sure you guys spread out.
I think what we're teaching this platoon, and just teaching in general, is tactical patience. They're so used to wanting to hit the objective in the time hack that they're given, and they blow through all the possible threats they have from point A to point B. When you're in your formations, open fields, section leaders, do not be scared to spread your formation out.
RTO, what's the time? Give me the real time, don't just make stuff up. Say 8 minutes.
8 minutes! You see a casualty, you turn around, get the casualty, and then you move out together. You move in together, you move out together. All right, you take a casualty, turn around, leave no man behind. All right?
A lot of the schools here, you find similar problems as you go to your school. It's usually a lack of resources or funding for teachers. But this school specifically, he said about 70% of the students here in Patois don't have birth certificates, so they can't attend school. So only about 30% of the children population in Patois is actually attending schools here, which is pretty concerning. So civil affairs at its basic level is we advise the commanders on all military things that are civil in nature. And whether it's government, the local population, institutions, economy, whatever, anything related to the civilian side or civil domain. Prior to even coming into the country, we analyze regional socio-political climates. We study those things, we identify the vulnerabilities. So the water sources in the village. And then we come up with ways things that we can do to impact those in order to meet our commander's objectives. We're deterring Boko Haram from coming further south. We're enabling the local population and the host nation government and their militaries to fight Boko Haram on their own. So by doing that, it prevents U.S. military from having to get into a large-scale conflict, obviously. But more importantly, we're enabling our African partners to be able to fight their own fights, not just against Boko Haram, but we're building and strengthening their institutions, their own government institutions and their militaries to combat Boko Haram now, but whatever other threats that may arise either regionally or within the country later on.
The United States military is operating in like 180 countries around the globe, and I think most people don't realize that. Nigeria and Cameroon are two of those countries where they're doing a lot of important work to combat extremism in the African continent. That's really important. And so I think we ought to be respectful of our troops for that and giving them props wherever we can. So that's all I have for today, folks. Thanks for watching The Hot Zone. I'm going to go back to enjoying the view. Hope you have a really good day, and I'll see you back here tomorrow. Take care.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.